Good evening and welcome to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 173 and movie review number 8. On Memorial Day weekend of this year, so that's about 3 weeks ago, we watched the 1963 movie PT 109. This is the story of President John F. Kennedy when he was a young U.S. Navy lieutenant junior grade, commanding a PT boat in the South Pacific. I gave it a score of 87. My recommend is I highly recommend it, but with a few qualifiers. So let's look at the historical background. And first of all, I'm going to be sipping on a little homemade cocktail here. Which is Cutty Sark, Scotch, blended Scotch, mixed with just a Sprite, zero. But my reason for choosing that is I think there may have been some kind of a relationship between Joe Kennedy, the senior Kennedy, and Scotch whiskey after the Prohibition years, and Cutty Sark was kind of may have been involved in that. So I think there's kind of a relationship there, if I remember right. So anyway, that's why I'm drinking that this evening. But this movie is based on the true story of John F. Kennedy serving in the United States Navy during World War II in the Solomon Islands campaign. The Solomon Islands are northeast of Australia, southeast of southeast of Papua New Guinea, and it was a Japanese established a foothold there. And by doing that, they could isolate Australia, which was a key ally of ours during the war. It was an important ally for Britain as well, and Britain had some places there in Southeast Asia that they were concerned with. The Solomons have 6 major islands, but about 900 smaller islands. Over 700,000 people live there today. Sadly, in 2022, the Solomon Islands signed a defense treaty with Communist China that will probably allow the CCP to station troops, aircraft, missiles, and ships there. That would indeed threaten Australia and American interests. You see, Americans fought and died to liberate those islands from the Japanese in World War II. But, as usual, we have lost the peace. And our current president has apparently, failed to do something to help the Solomon Islands, and so they have turned towards the communists. That is a tragic, tragic story. So, current international politics, plus the great need for knowing American history, are compelling reasons for watching this film. What were PT boats? This is about PT 109. What does that even mean? PT boats were patrol torpedo boats. They were developed first at the end of World War I, but came into their own during the early days of World War II, utilizing ideas from civilian racing boats. So these are small, light boats, about 70 to 80 feet in length, and they used aircraft engines, and they were armed with 2 to 4 torpedoes, a variety of machine guns, and small cannon. The boats were used in the island chains of the Pacific and in the Mediterranean along the shoreline there, where shallow water prevented heavier ships from going. These small boats could be used to attack bigger boats with their torpedoes and provide a variety of missions. So what is the plot of this movie? In the movie, Kennedy is fresh on the scene of the South Pacific Theater, coming from Melville, which you hear that term repeated in the movie. Melville was a Navy base in Rhode Island where they trained PT boat crews. You think, well, why would they train them in Rhode Island when the war's in the Pacific? Well, again, the northeastern United States is where rich people raced their motorboats out in the ocean, and that's where this technology developed. These boats were light, They were built out of wood and aluminum. They were very lightweight construction. And designing these boats so that they could withstand heavy seas was a problem. Some of the early boats cracked and broke up. So, just developing these boats was a problem. But they had an important mission. And one of the opening scene there, the dialogue between President Kennedy, well, Lieutenant Junior Grade Kennedy, and a sailor, it was very interesting because the sailor could not grasp that Kennedy, who was wealthy, he had political connections, had used those connections to get sent into the action, while the sailor was trying to use his connections through the NCO channels to get out of the action. And that's a telling scene that describes a lot of things, but how America has changed in the past 80 years or so. You see, in World War I and then in World War II, wealthy sons and students at America's elite Ivy League schools quit school, left their riches, joined the military, and went off to fight wars. Today, what goes on at Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and all these fancy schools? Have you seen that in the news lately? Okay, there's a big change in our culture. Once upon a time, the wealthy sons of America's elite chose to go off to fight America's wars, seeking out danger. Today's elites do not, generally speaking. So again, we've seen the students of our nation's Ivy League schools siding with Muslim terrorists who attacked Israel on October 7th and demonstrating a visceral anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism. So to watch this movie and understand President John Kennedy, Lieutenant Junior Grade U.S. Navy, and then compare him with modern day presidents, that's an interesting exercise right there. Fascinating character study. So that's part of the plot. Lieutenant Junior Grade Kennedy is, and a Lieutenant Junior Grade in the Navy is equivalent to a first lieutenant in the Army. Okay, so it's an O2, right? So Lieutenant Kennedy is given a PT boat that is in a sad state of disrepair, PT boat number 109, and he accepts the challenge of getting it fit for duty. With a new crew, he gets the boat ready for action. The movie takes a little artistic license by giving him a mission to rescue some Marine raiders that were stranded on an island and they were under pressure from the Japanese. And Kennedy, his boat had just got back from another mission, and so it wasn't refueled. And so there was some danger there of running out of fuel. But this mission actually, historically, took place after the incident with PT 109 getting cut in half. And so the movie took a little license to put that in the front to build up to the PT 109 incident. Now, usually, I'm a stickler for historical accuracy in the movies, but this change absolutely makes sense for the movie. It does show that Kennedy participated in more than one heroic action, and so it establishes a pattern. Now, the major incident of the plot was a night mission where PT 109 got rammed by a Japanese destroyer, and Kennedy, then the boat's burning, there's burning oil all over, and there's, he's got a surviving crew, so he has to get them to an island where they had to swim like 4 or 5 miles at night. Some of them were wounded, and they survived a few days on this desert island before he moved them a couple of miles away to another island from which they could get rescued. Kennedy held that crew together when their morale dropped due to no food, no water, right? No medical help. And you got some wounded guys there, some with burns. And then eventually an Australian coast watcher and his Solomon Islander natives rescue Kennedy and his crew. And then from there, in real life, Kennedy went on to command another PT boat, PT 59. The movie ends with his accepting that command. Now let's talk about the characters a little bit. Cliff Robertson plays Kennedy and was actually chosen by Kennedy for the role as Lieutenant Junior Grade Kennedy. Kennedy. Kennedy chose Robertson after looking at a couple of other guys. Robertson was about 40 at the time. And so when the accident and the war was going on, Kennedy was in his 20s. So there was an age difference there. But to me, that's, and they were kind of worried about that back then when they were making the movie. But really, that didn't affect me at all. I think Robertson, kind of generally speaking, looked like Kennedy. So it worked, right? But President Kennedy, in fact, his dad as well, helped really control the movie production. It was a very tightly controlled thing. I mean, this movie was made when Kennedy was president. And so the White House had its hand in this and had some say-so in how things went, including the script. James Gregory played the maintenance commander, Commander Ritchie, at Tulagi, and shows the kind of the picayune, tyrannical side of the military at times. But it was interesting how they portrayed that commander and how Kennedy did him a favor later on in the movie. So I thought it was really kind of interesting, showing some growth there. And that Commander Ritchie had some problems because he had served in World War One and missed out on the action, so to speak. So anyway, that was kind of an interesting character there that showed some development. Ty Hardin played Ensign Leonard Tom, the XO for PT-109, and he was a good support role for Kennedy. And then Robert Culp played Ensign George Ross. And ensign is like a second lieutenant in the Army. So it's a 01 is his rank. But Ensign George Ross. And he was not a regular crewman on PT-109, but he played a key role on this one mission and helped the crew survive. So that's just a short list of the major characters. Production. Now, this movie was released in 1963, and it was based on the book PT-109, John F. Kennedy in World War II, by Robert Donovan. So here's the book. Now, I've not read the book in its entirety. When I was a kid, about the 6th grade, so you're looking at, I don't know, 68, 69, somewhere in there. I read kind of a children's version of this, and I did see the movie there in the 60s. Not in the movie theater. I saw it on TV. The movie really didn't do that well. It was produced by Brian Foy for Warner Brothers, directed by Leslie Marlinson and Louis Milestone. There was a lot of turnover with directors. There was a lot of drama and controversy that went on as they made this movie. The screenplay was by Richard Breen, and the budget for the movie was $4 million, but the movie only brought in about $3.5 million, maybe more on its international market, but it was not considered to be a financial success. And again, it was released in 1963, so there was a little bit of a controversy. I mean, this was the first time that a movie about a sitting president was released. And so, that alone was pushing the envelope, right? But then shortly after the movie was released, Kennedy was assassinated. And so that kind of, for whatever reason, shut down distribution of the movie a little bit. And it was a long movie. It was, I don't remember it was over 2 hours, I think. I don't remember the exact length of it. Yeah, I think it was over 2 hours. And so Kennedy was concerned about there being too much of the movie, right? Well, my evaluation of this movie. I saw this movie, like I said, as a kid on TV in the 60s. some of my earliest memories, I remember as a 4-year-old the assassination and burial of President Kennedy, the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald by Jack Ruby. I mean, I remember watching this stuff on the news. We were news hounds. My dad was a news hound, and so I would watch the news too. I remember the burial of President Kennedy, the funeral procession, all of that stuff. I remember. The book and the movie are inherently political. Uh, there's no way to avoid that because they both came out when Kennedy was president of the United States. However, I do like the movie as a war movie on its own merits. One of the criticism, there's the time, is length was 140 minutes. But watching the movie at home on DVD, I did not mind that length at all. And even in a movie theater, I don't think I would have minded. The movie held my interest throughout. Now, 1963 production quality is not up to 21st century standards, of course. The storyline, the characters stood out as being very believable and accurate. And I'm really glad that we watched it on Memorial Day weekend. The art form of old movies does take some adjustments if you are young and you're not used to them. So I can say that this historic piece would probably not be as easy or enjoyable for those under the age of 50. But the movie, I think, is important, and it is enjoyable if you set aside the blinders that modern media places on you. The book and movie, again, are intrinsically political because of being associated with the Kennedy while he was president, and there's controlling factors going on there. So how much of the story is amplified or exaggerated to make the president look good? In the obituary published by the New York Times on August 10th of 2003 for the author of the book, Mr. Donovan, it says Mr. Donovan wrote 14 books, many about Washington politics, and was instrumental in the revival of Harry Truman's flagging reputation with a 2-volume biography, Conflict and Crisis, The Presidency of Harry S. Truman, published by Norton in 1977. And These Tumultuous Years, The Presidency of Harry Truman, is the second volume. So it seems that his job was to write about Democrat presidents to bolster their ratings, maybe. So I think that the author, Donovan, is kind of a Democrat insider. He was a journalist, and journalists lean left anyway. So I think that was kind of part of the plan. I mean, here's a young president. Let's do this book. Let's do this movie and kind of boost him, right? Nonetheless, I've always thought that Kennedy was a good president, even though I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican. And I think that Kennedy would be ashamed and aghast at what the Democrat Party has become today. Now, I can certainly look at his personal morals and how he treated his wife with some disdain. Many of his policies, though, were admirable, and certainly his service to his country was above and beyond. Again, I would point to that opening dialogue in the movie that absolutely sets the tone. Instead of using his advantage to avoid the war, he used his advantage to go to the fighting. And grasping that idea absolutely makes the movie. So my recommendation, I highly recommend this movie. It would seem, though, to be given, you would need kind of a historical introduction. You need a comparison with modern day attitudes and presidents. If you're a World War II nerd like me, this movie is essential. Absolutely. Pair the movie with another like They Were Expendable, starring John Wayne, Robert Montgomery, who was actually a PT boat commander in World War II, and Donna Reed. These two movies will give a great introduction to the war in the Pacific. And if you're a Navy guy, this is a must-watch movie. If you're a student of presidents, this movie is important. Keeping in mind it came out in '63, just months before Kennedy was assassinated. He was the last president we've had who wore a military uniform and served in some capacity in combat. Jimmy Carter certainly served his country in the Navy, but did not see combat. George W. Bush served in the Air National Guard during the Vietnam era. He was a pilot, an F-102 pilot, really. But again, he didn't see combat. So Kennedy stands head and shoulders above the modern day presidents in service to our country. Now Nixon also served, Ford served. So we've had some presidents serve, but after Jimmy Carter, it really kind of drops off there. I mean, yeah, George W. served in the National Guard, but so I think this is a good teaching point movie for both the historical situation, courage, perseverance, leadership. Politically, I think it could be used for demonstrating what presidents once were and asking why they're not that anymore. Why does a Harvard graduate behave the way Kennedy behaved then versus the Harvard graduates of today? So this raises some important cultural questions as well as simply being a great historical piece. So I would strongly recommend watching this movie. Well, this is Stab the Dragon. It's June 18th, 2024, Fort Worth, Texas, out here.